What we're seeing right now with ClawdBot, now Moltbot, after the whole naming shuffle, isn't a slightly better assistant or a shinier chat interface. It's a fundamental shift in how AI fits into a person's life and work. This is the moment where AI stops being something you visit and starts being something that lives alongside you. And once that clicks, it's hard to unsee. Most people are still using ClawdBot at maybe 1% of what it can do. They install it, they ask it a question, and maybe they let it write something, and then they shrug. Well, that's like buying a fully staffed company and asking the receptionist for the weather, and that's it. ClawdBot, it isn't a chatbot. It's a sovereign agent, and that difference changes everything. Traditional AI tools live in short-term memory. You open a session, ask something, you get an answer, and then you close the tab, and it's gone. Even if the model is smart, the relationship resets every time. There's no continuity. There's no real ownership, no sense of this AI works for me because you have to reprompt it every single time. Well, ClawdBot flipped that model on its head. Instead of being a reactive interface, it introduced a persistent local first orchestration layer. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying this thing stays with you. It remembers, it acts, and it can see your files, your tasks, your calendar, your workflows, and your digital identity because you let it. Now, this is where the sovereignty part comes in. You're not renting intelligence from a cloud chat window anymore. You're running an agent that operates in your environment on your terms, connected directly to the systems that you already use. File systems, to-do lists, communication apps, APIs, schedules, code bases, and once AI has continuity and access, it stops feeling like software and starts feeling like an actual employee, or even better yet, a business partner. There's a growing moment towards what people called the zero employee company, not because humans are disappearing, but because one person can subtly operate at the scale of a small team. And that one person is ClawdBot. It's basically built for this. You don't ask it for help. You tell it the mission here, and then it decides what to do. It doesn't need to say, well, I'm tired or I'm sick or I'm going to call into work today. That's a massive psychological shift. You see, most tools wait for instructions. ClawdBot is designed to look for work. You can literally say, I'm a one-person business. Take as much off my plate as possible. Improve my workflow. Build things. Make suggestions. Don't wait for permission. And it listens. Then it acts. One of the most immediate life-changing use cases is the morning brief. And this sounds simple until you actually experience it. Every morning at a set time, ClawdBot sends a structured overview of your day, not generic motivation, not random news, information that's relevant to you and your business. It checks your to-do list and tells you what you need to focus on today, what it plans to work on today, what it already worked on while you were asleep. And that alone, guys, that's wild. You wake up and your AI employee already has a shift behind it. Pretty insane, right? But it goes further. It looks up trending news and videos based on your actual interests, not what you explicitly asked for, but it knows about you from ongoing conversations. And it doesn't ask, what should I search? It just knows. Then it connects the dots. Maybe someone in your niche posted something relevant. Maybe there's a pattern in your calendar. Maybe there's unfinished work sitting in a shared folder. ClawdBot doesn't just report this, it suggests actions. That's the key difference here. It doesn't dump information on you. It tells you what to do. This is reverse prompting in action. Instead of you asking the AI questions, the AI prompts you with decisions. And moreover, you can schedule it to work every single night, not to answer questions, but to build while you sleep. For example, you can tell it, don't push anything live, create pull requests and improve workflows, prototype ideas, build tools that make tomorrow easier for me. So when I wake up, I can review it. And then you go to sleep. And while you're out, ClawdBot is thinking about your business, your projects, and your bottlenecks. It wakes up with code, documents, systems, and ideas ready for a review. Now, that's not just assistance here when you're online. That's delegation for 24/7 workflow. And a normal chatbot reacts, ClawdBot anticipates. And one of the most powerful use cases of ClawdBot is letting it become a productive vibe coder. And instead of saying, build me X, you give it permission to decide what to build. That's a scary sentence for a lot of people out there, but it's also where the magic happens because ClawdBot can notice repetitive tasks, missing tools, messy workflows, and half formatted ideas that you casually mention. Then it quietly turns those into actual systems, document views, internal dashboards, project trackers, automation scripts, entire interfaces here. Listen, it does this without you asking first. You review the work, you test, you commit, and that's exactly how you work with a human developer. But here's the thing about human memory. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, I can't even remember what I just ate for breakfast recently because ideas vanish, context fades, decisions get lost in chat logs and scattered notes and text messages. ClawdBot fixes that by building what people call a second brain. This isn't just a notes app, it's a living knowledge system that grows alongside your conversations. And every day, ClawdBot creates a high-level journal entry summarizing what you discussed, structured documents for important ideas, tagged records for scripts, notes, research, and plans. You don't have to ask it to do this. It just does it. And weeks later, when something becomes relevant again, you can go back and see exactly what you were thinking, why you made a decision, and what context existed at the time. And this is especially powerful if you're someone, who constantly sends random thoughts to your AI. Instead of those thoughts disappearing into chat history, you get organized, expanded, and preserved in its memory with intent. And another killer use case is the daily research report. Instead of randomly researching things when you remember to, ClawdBot proactively sends you a deep dive every single day based on your interests, goals, and business needs. And sometimes it's a technical concept that you're curious about. Sometimes it's a workflow improvement. Sometimes it's a meta-analysis of how you and the agent are working together. So ClawdBot can also reflect on its own performance. It can suggest ways to improve collaboration, new systems to try, new routines to implement. And that's not static intelligence there. That's improved partnership. One of the most impressive skills people added to ClawdBot is parallel trend research across Reddit and X. So instead of manually scrolling on social media, ClawdBot can analyze engagement over the last 30 days, surface the top threads, identify reoccurring themes, and then turn that into actionable insights or potentially content ideas for new videos. So this is huge if you create content for your business. And if you don't create content for your business, then you're probably going to be out of business in the future. If you build products or you care about public sentiment of your customers, you're not guessing what people are talking about. You're seeing it in real time, summarized, filtered, and contextualized without burning hours of your time or your sleep. I know how that gets, especially in the bootstrapping stage of your business where you're running on little to no sleep because you can't afford to pay people to do the work for you. And because it can plug into APIs, this research can happen automatically on schedule and feed directly into your briefs or your reports. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Most traditional learning language model interfaces simply, they can't do this. They don't have persistence. They don't have agency. They don't have logical context. And they don't act without being prompted. And you can chain prompts all day. You can create your own AI agents, but that's still you doing the orchestration. And you still have to send a message to your agent to get a response. ClawdBot flips the responsibility. It becomes the orchestrator that works while you're not on your computer. That's why people who say AI isn't that useful usually haven't used it this way. They've never given it a job to do. Now, let's be real for a second. Giving an autonomous agent deep access to your system, your information, it's powerful, but it's also dangerous. ClawdBot operates at a level that raises serious security questions. File system access, communication channels, identity linked actions, root level permissions there. That's not something you should treat casually. This is why the local first design matters so much. You're not just trusting a remote black box here that, could go rogue at any moment like Rise of the Machines. You're running something you control, configure, and limit. Keyword limitations. Still, the risk is real though. A misconfigured agent with too much freedom can cause real damage to your business and potentially your identity, right? This isn't a toy. It's closer to hiring someone and handing them the keys to your office. So there's a lot of trust that you're handing over there as well. And when you zoom out, ClawdBot represents something bigger than features or just an AI agent here that you prompt. It represents a change in mindset. AI is no longer something that you use. It's something you work with. You don't micromanage it. You define goals, boundaries, and values, and then you let it operate. That's why people who truly learn and lean into ClawdBot feel like their productivity has exploded overnight. They don't just automate tasks, they've restructured how they get work done on a daily basis. One person, one agent, real leverage. You're a one-person army here, but ClawdBot didn't start in a lab or a VC deck. It started after a long win. You see, Peter Steinberg spent 13 years building PSFDF Kit, which is a bootstrap version, right? He scaled it and eventually sold it from the outside. This was his dream. From the inside, it let him cook. Okay, proper burnout is what he faced, like a lot of us. Not the I need a weekend, kind, the existential kind. After the sale, there was no urgent roadmap, no fire to put out, just what he later described as a kind of hedonistic emptiness. And if you've ever shipped something big and then stopped, you know that feeling. Your brain still wants friction. It wants something to push against. It wants challenges to overcome. If you just make it and then you have a lot of money, you're not really progressing still. And around early 2024, Steinberg started paying closer attention to AI tools. Chatbots, they were everywhere. They talked confidently, they hallucinated constantly, and they failed at basic logic at times. They were impressive, but they were brittle. And most importantly, they stopped at words, and they stopped when you stopped working as well. You could ask them what to do. You could ask them to do it. The gap became the itch. The original idea wasn't grand. It wasn't building the future of computing there. It was very limited, and you could see it on a day-to-day basis. Although it was leaps and bounds behind, having to figure things out yourself, it was closer to, what if I could glue Claude to WhatsApp and see what happens? The first experiment was called vRelay. The goal was brutally simple. Take a chat interface that people already use and wire it into a capable coding model with no dashboards, no enterprise user interface, just messages in, actions out. And Steinberg approached it the way burnt out developers often do when they stop caring about polish. And that's vibe coding. No massive architecture planning, no future proofing, just ship something that works, then bend it until it breaks, then fix that too. Okay, the priority wasn't safety rails or abstraction layers. It was raw power, hackability, speed. That philosophy became the DNA of the project. And at some point, the AI itself suggested the name ClawdBot. A dumb, perfect pun, Claude, but with claws. The image mattered. This wasn't an assistant that politely suggested things. This was an assistant with hands, with grip, something that could grab your system and move things around. That framing stuck. And when ClawdBot first dropped in late December of 2024, it didn't explode. There were no headlines, no hype cycle, not a lot of marketers talking about it, mostly just a handful of, extremely online developers poking at it. Certain influential people started to notice it, which is usually a signal that something weird and important is happening. But the broader developer world didn't jump in right away. And for two reasons. First, it looked dangerous. Root access, shell commands, file system control, persistent background agent while you're sleeping. That's not something most people just casually install there. That sounds like, deep state government hacking getting into your personal life here. So obviously you can understand that. Secondly, it looked hard. It looked difficult. It looked like you were becoming a programmer yourself, or you're trying to mine some Bitcoin here. The documentation was thin. Setup required comfort with nodes, terminals, terms like environment variables, and the idea that your AI could brick your machine if you weren't careful. So it stayed very niche for a bit. Then in January 2026, 3 things changed at once that you need to know about. Number 1, people started showing what they were actually doing with it. Not demos, real workflows, bots reconciling finances, agents managing inboxes, systems running autonomously for days. Number 2, the documentation improved just enough that curious developers could get it running without a full weekend of pain. And number 3, the mood shifted. Developers were tired of cloud-only AI tools that forgot everything and asked permission for every single step the moment that you rebooted your computer. And ClawdBot felt like a jailbreak here for your iPhone. The GitHub stars jumped, then it doubled, then exploded. Over 60,000 stars in weeks. That wasn't about hype. It was a signal. A lot of people were quietly waiting for something like this as the future of AI. At the center of ClawdBot is something called the Moltbot gateway. This is where it stops being a bot and becomes an operating layer. The gateway runs on Node.js 22+, and it's always on, always listening, and always ready to act. Think of it as the nervous system. It doesn't just pass messages to an AI model, it orchestrates everything: incoming chats, outgoing actions, tool execution, memory updates, and permissions. It decides what the agent can see and what it's allowed to touch. The architecture is split into 4 layers, and this split matters. The gateway is the brainstem. Routing, sections, execution control, and channels are the senses: WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord, Slack, Signal, iMessage, Teams. Whatever you talk through, skills are learning behaviors. Modular plugins that let the agent talk to APIs, smart homes, financial systems, or internal tools. The tools are the muscles, shell commands, file access, browser control, real execution, not suggestions. And this is where Steinberg meant by Claude with hands. The AI doesn't just say, you should rename these files, it actually renames them. And because this all runs locally, most of your data never leaves your machine. ClawdBot, it's aggressively local first. Messages, files, logs, memory, all of your hardware. The only thing that goes out to external APIs is the minimal context needed for reasoning. That's it. And this matters for privacy, but it also matters for continuity. Cloud assistants, they forget. They reset. They lose context until you re-explain yourself every single time. And ClawdBot doesn't forget unless you tell it to forget. And at first, people ran Moltbot on their laptops. They didn't last. A persistent agent wants to be always on, always available. And that's not how most people treat their primary machine. The community quickly converged on a favorite host, which is the Apple Mac Mini. It's silent, energy efficient, and it's always plugged in. Strong M series performance, deep Mac OS hooks into iMessage, shortcuts, health and system APIs. They become the unofficial AI employee box. Some people ran it on cloud VPS instances for uptime and webhooks, but that came with privacy and security trade-offs. And others used Docker or platforms like Zebra, gaining isolation, but losing easy access to local hardware. So there's no perfect setup here, but the trend was clear that you need to pay attention to. Dedicated hardware beats convenience. Traditional AI assistants have goldfish brains. You talk, they respond, and they're like yes men, not really challenging you or progressing you forward. And they have trouble, being like inventors at times, and the context fades every single time. And next session, it always starts fresh. Moltbot doesn't work that way. It uses 2 simple files, memory.md and soul.md. The brilliance here is how boring the solution is. Memory is just a markdown file, plain text, human readable, editable. Every interaction can update it, preferences, project names, writing style, ongoing goals. If the project always means the Q3 launch, it learns that. And if it gets something wrong, you open the file, you delete the line. There's no restraining, no prompts, no gaslighting. This turns memory from a black box into a shared surface. Then there's soul.md. This file defines how the agent behaves, the tone, the boundaries, the assertiveness, risk tolerance, whether it pushes back or just executes. You can turn it into a polite corporate assistant or an opinionated orchestrator that says it how it is, or something in between. This led to a weird side effect. People started selling souls, pre-tuned personalities, optimized for executive assistants, engineering management, or research workflows. And it sounds ridiculous, until you realize it's just configuration packaged as expertise, and it works. But people didn't stop at boring automation. Developers merged pull requests from an Apple Watch. Researchers scraped and analyzed millions of tweets in a day. Agents unsubscribed users from newsletters autonomously, and smart homes reacted to messages. This wasn't because ClawdBot was magical. It was because it wasn't sandboxed into politeness. But, success attracts lawyers. And in January of 2026, Anthropic politely asked Steinberg to change the name. Trademark concerns were there, and it's understandable. ClawdBot became Moltbot. Some crustacean theme, different phase, shedding the old shell. The rebrand happened fast, and it was almost too fast because during the chaos of moving repos and handles, bots sniped accounts, scammers launched a fake token called Claude. It briefly hit a $16 million market cap before collapsing, and Steinberg had to publicly clarify that there's no crypto, there's no token, no affiliation. It was messy, but it also showed how much attention the project had attracted. Because let's be clear, Moltbot is spicy. It runs the high permission, it executes commands, it reads external data, it reasons probabilistically, and the combination is powerful and fragile. The biggest risk is indirect prompt injection. The agent reads emails, calendar invites, web pages, and attackers can hide instructions in plain text. Summarize this email becomes send your configuration file to this URL. If you're not careful and this configuration file contains private keys or passwords, tokens, credentials, that's not hypothetical, it's structural. In late January of 2026, a fake VS Code extension called ClawdBot Agent appeared. It looked legit, it worked. It also dropped a remote access Trojan and a Rust loader onto Windows machines. Advanced evasion, anti-analytic tricks, real malware craftsmanship. This wasn't a failure of Moltbot itself. It was a consequence of visibility. When something becomes so powerful and popular, attackers are going to follow. Security researchers found hundreds of Moltbot gateways exposed to the public internet. Admin ports open, reverse proxies misconfigures, headers trusted blindly, and in some cases, attackers could trick the gateway into treating external requests as logical, gaining full access. Gateway into treating external requests as local, gaining full access. Shell commands, files, conversation history. This wasn't theoretical either. It happened. The community responded fast. Bind the gateway to local host by default, use pairing codes for unknown senders, and audit tools and MCP servers for hidden instructions. Deploy on isolated hardware. They require human approval for sensitive actions, and they run behind VPNs, not public IPs. So this turned Moltbot from a loaded gun into something closer to heavy machinery. Still dangerous, but manageable if respected. But most founders, they don't want to think about reverse proxies and threat models. So a new market appeared, set up as a service, people charging high ticket fees to safely deploy AI employees, pre-configured stacks, assistant in a box type kits, custom skills, personality tuning. It's the early consulting layer of a new platform shift. Running an AI agent isn't free. Heavy users burn real money on API credits, but the leverage often justifies it. However, the end goal isn't just a better chat user interface. It's no user interface at all. That dream is that you stop opening apps, you stop clicking around, you talk to your agent, and the world moves and it remembers everything. Files change, emails send, calendars adjust, systems respond. That's not science fiction anymore. It's clunky now, it's technical, but it's real and it's starting, it's happening. ClawdBot, now Moltbot, is a prototype of the future. It's not clean, it's not safe by default, but honest about what's required to get there. Moltbot matters because it crosses a line. It turns AI from a suggestion engine into an execution engine. By staying local first, transparent, and configurable, it solves problems that cloud assistants avoid. But by granting absolute authority, it forces us to confront new risks. This isn't the end state here. It's the messy middle ground. And that's what makes it important. And that's where the magic happens. ClawdBot didn't just add clause to Claude. It reminded everyone that intelligence without agency is just advice. And agency without restraint changes everything.